their duties within the Department of Defense or the State Department. I recently have been in touch with many lawyers that are working on Guantanamo cases, on Bagram cases, and they say that it is worse now under the Obama administration in these court battles because you have the Obama administration actually making official wild legal theories of the Bush administration that don't actually pass the constitutional muster test with actual constitutional law experts that care at all about human rights. On the issue of state secrets, the Obama administration has gone to bat in defending the Bush administration's positions. At Bagram, you had hundreds of prisoners, and there have been some minor changes recently, but you've had hundreds of prisoners, over 600, that have been largely held incommunicado without access to the International Committee of the Red Cross. They recently allocated another $60 million to expand Bagram, which some human rights activists call Obama's Guantanamo. We have the Patriot Act now being extended once again, and you see the Obama administration defending it, and many within the Congress. Of course, remember that Russ Feingold was the only senator to vote against the Patriot Act. We have Iraq continuing, despite what you might hear on the news about U.S. troops being out by the end of 2010. If you actually talk to the Pentagon, and I talked to a Pentagon spokesperson the other day, he told me that they're surging contractors right now in Iraq to fill the gaps that are being left by the drawdown of U.S. troops from cities. The United States spent about $1 billion, just shy of $1 billion, building this massive colonial fortress in Baghdad that's the size of 80 football fields. This fortress has over 2,500 employees working out of it, 500 CIA operatives, and 3,000 mercenaries on the U.S. government payroll to provide executive protection services, as they call them, for U.S. diplomats and others that travel around Iraq. What you're going to have, at minimum, are 50,000 U.S. troops that have a redefined role in Iraq, officially redefined, as being a counterterrorism force and a training force for the Iraqi military. If you want to know about the glories of U.S. military training of foreign militaries, look no further than Fort Benning in Georgia and the role of the School of the Americas. Training is hardly some nonviolent alternative to having combat troops in Iraq. But the issue of the mercenaries is a central one, because what the Obama administration is doing is using private companies to mask the continued widespread involvement of the United States militarily in Iraq. In fact, one of Blackwater's executives, Joseph Schmitz, said not too long ago that he could actually see a scenario where the United States drew down its forces and then it would provide more business opportunities for private companies like Blackwater to go in and fill the numbers. If you think about it, it's a very politically expedient strategy because you don't have the numbers of dead being counted in the official death tolls when individuals working for any of the 630 corporations now in Iraq end up dying. You don't have to deal with the prospect of a draft, and you don't actually have to own it because it's not officially a military operation. Many of these contractors fall outside of the military chain of command and have not been held accountable under any system of law. They haven't been subjected to the Uniform Code of Military Justice and the current civilian laws on the books of the United States dealing with contractors, namely the Military Extraterritorial Jurisdiction Act, which was passed originally in 2000 and then amended a few times since then, is written in a way that it is legally unclear if it applies to non-DOD, non-Department of Defense contractors. In other words, the Blackwaters, Triple Canopies, Dying Corps, the ones that are really doing the armed activities in Iraq, may well fall outside of the scope of U.S. civilian law and military law. What needs to be said, though, is that they do not fall outside the scope of the War Crimes Act. And I think that when the Justice Department actually got around to indicting 6 individual Blackwater operatives on manslaughter charges stemming from their role in the Nisour Square massacre in Baghdad on September 16, 2007, 17 Iraqis gunned down in cold blood in the streets of Baghdad. The Justice Department indicted them on manslaughter charges, but they could have gone after them for war crimes, and I think it would have been more appropriate. In fact, the one individual from Blackwater who pled guilty himself, he confessed to having shot an unarmed woman in a car and described other Blackwater operatives shooting people in the back as they were fleeing the scene. This isn't some radical left-wing allegation being made about companies on the U.S. government payroll. This is the U.S. Justice Department, and I remind you, those indictments were handed down when Bush was still in power. So anyone that wants to talk about how Blackwater was just doing its job should actually pick up the phone and call old New Casey, because it was ultimately his office that authorized the indictment of these individuals. And they did it for political reasons, but also because actual prosecutors said that this is a clear case of these people being guilty of gunning down these individuals. What is ultimately very, very disturbing is not just that the Obama administration is continuing to use these companies, but that it is actually escalating the use of private corporations in the US wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In Afghanistan right now, there are roughly 62 to 64,000 US troops. There are 74,000 private contractors for just the Department of Defense. That means that you now have more corporate forces, the sort of shadow army, than you do individual soldiers in Afghanistan right now. That does not include the contractors that work for the Central Intelligence Agency on the drone bombing campaign, for instance, which Blackwater does. It does not include the companies that work for the State Department, like Armor Group Wackenhut, which recently was in the news because that company provided the guards that were supposed to be protecting US diplomats in Kabul, and instead they were literally having frat-type parties where they were drinking alcohol shots off of each other's butt cracks, fondling each other's genitals, and hazing new employees that were going there to be on guard duty, and also engaging in really racist conduct toward the non-US guards that were working for them. Why is this company still on the payroll? Why is this company still operating in Afghanistan? Why is Blackwater being employed by the Obama administration for not one, not two, but three separate agencies of the federal government? During the campaign, I talked to some of Obama's senior foreign policy advisors, people who are now high up within the Obama administration. And I was pressing them on the issue of what Obama was going to do about Blackwater, because Obama, relative to others in the Senate, was decent on this issue. I wouldn't say that he was good or great on it, but he understood that this was a serious issue, the outsourcing of US wars. And he authored what became the leading legislation on the part of the Democrats to regulate, not ban, not outlaw, but to regulate the mercenary industry and effectively bring them into the fold. And I was asking his senior foreign policy advisors specifically about Blackwater. What is he going to do about Blackwater? And they said on the campaign trail that Obama cannot and will not, that's a direct quote, rule out using Blackwater or other mercenary forces in Iraq. When Obama went to Afghanistan on the campaign, Blackwater guys started floating a story online that Obama had told the Blackwater guards that were part of his security detail when he went to Afghanistan, that Obama told them that he thought that they had gotten a bad rap. And this, what's that? Yeah, so, and this made the rounds on sort of the mercenary listservs from the individual guys on the ground, and they were sort of saying, Obama's not going to be that bad of a guy after all. Well, it turns out that they were right when it comes to business for the war industry, because Blackwater has a $217 million contract with the State Department right now in Iraq. They have a $5 million training contract with the Department of Defense. They have a $220 million contract that was just extended in Iraq by the Obama administration. And meanwhile, the US State Department, which is now headed by Hillary Clinton, who ironically signed on to legislation to ban Blackwater on the campaign trail, is now being guarded by them when she goes abroad, and other mercenary companies. They have, the extent to which the Obama administration has tried to address the Blackwater problem equals this. They switched companies in Iraq for the huge mega security contract that Blackwater had, and they hired a company called Triple Canopy. Triple Canopy then proceeded to hire many of the Blackwater guys that quote-unquote were laid off after Blackwater's contract was not renewed. This is a company that, similar to Blackwater, has a very dubious human rights record, and they've been involved with the recruitment of Latin American mercenaries to deploy in Iraq. This is also a company that has individuals that have bragged about killing Iraqis for sport, very similar to the way that Blackwater operatives thought that they were somehow doling out payback for 9/11, according to the Justice Department, when they were laying Hajis out on a cardboard in Iraq. The situation has gotten worse under Obama, similar to what we hear from constitutional lawyers fighting against the unlawful detention and torture of prisoners. It's gotten worse with contractors. In the second quarter of 2009, the Obama administration increased the number of armed contractors in Afghanistan by 29%. In the subsequent quarter, it went up by another 11%. So you're seeing a surge of these private forces. At the same time, you have the fact that this system has long been a bipartisan program. I think that a lot of people tend to think or have a mentality that sort of the evils that we now are sort of witnessing are a mess that Obama inherited from President Bush. It's important to remember that the Democrats promoted the lie that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Powerful Democrats did, not rank-and-file anti-war Democrats, and there's a few of them, but in the Congress, but powerful Democrats. In fact, many of the top cabinet officials promoted the lies that led us to the illegal occupation and invasion of Iraq. But this program of radical privatization of war has been on the books for many, many decades, and it has been pushed forward by both Republicans and Democrats alike. In Eisenhower's famous